The Reclaimer Saga. Oh, the Reclaimer Saga. 343's grand vision for the future of Halo, packed to the brim with all manner of changes, be them art style, or weapon balance, or character motivation. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's keep this opener on the short side so we can dive into the meat and potatoes faster. The Reclaimer Saga was originally known as the Reclaimer Trilogy, and was to encompass, as expected, 3 Halo games, 4 to 6. After a polarizing reception to Halos 4 and 5, 343 backpedaled on this plan and kept the Reclaimer Saga to just those 2 games, moving on to hopefully greener pastures with Halo Infinite. The Reclaimer Saga is a landmark time for the Halo franchise, not due to the heights it reached, but due to the depths it plunged. Halos 4 and 5, while their own qualities can be debated eternally, were objective failures in terms of both player retention and overall popularity in comparison to the games released under Bungie. So why is that? Well, I'm glad you asked, figment of my imagination. Together we'll take a look at how Halos 4 and 5 failed to accomplish their namesake, reclaiming what the franchise once had. Hey, this is part 2, there's a part 1 focusing on Reach that'll be linked in the description here, check that out if you haven't, it'll make things a bit more streamlined here. Now, this video was meant to drop a bunch of days ago, but I made the mistake of watching Cyberpunk Edge Runners, and for anyone that's also watched it, you'd know why that put me out of commission for the better part of a week. But I'm back on track now, so here's the game plan for the rest of this video. While in the Reach essay I had basically dedicated sections for both campaign and multiplayer, considering that I'm going to be covering 2 games instead of 1 here, I'd like to actually do that in a timely manner for all involved, so I'm going to be simplifying it down to just looking at Halo 4 and Halo 5 in general. As a bit of a disclaimer, I have not actually played Halo 5 since I have never owned an Xbox. Out of the 2, I've only played Halo 4 on MCC, so much of the stuff I'll pull from for Halo 5 are people and other things that are outside my own sphere, but I'm trying to keep it general enough for both games that it doesn't matter if I played it or not, keeping this as objective as possible out here with a little bit of my opinion sprinkled on top. Now, here I'll be introducing a framework of sorts to look at these games. This will carry over to the final video in Halo Infinite, and it wasn't in the last Reach one, because I felt it didn't really fit what I was trying to do there. Basically, this is focused on looking at 343 and their management of Halo and how it contributed to its declining popularity, which, of course, didn't mesh with the Reach video, because I mean Bungie isn't 343, is it? Anyway, the framework is pretty simple. Just 3 concepts that can be used to look at 343's time with Halo. Concepts that are as follows: the choices that 343 made or have made, other contemporary games and their influences on 343's games, and fan reception to everything modern Halo. These essentially give us a nice old umbrella to cover everything 343 Halo in a more concise way than just pointing fingers and throwing my points at the wall until something sticks. Essentially, I'm just using them as talking points to look at why exactly the Reclaimer Saga failed to capture what fans wanted. That cleared and out of the way, let's quit dallying and go ahead with Halo 4. Let's begin with the elephant in the room. Or, perhaps I should say, the elite in the room. The Reclaimer Saga saw a massive shift in intent at 343's discretion, the most obvious of which is the art style. In the Reach video I touched upon this topic, but Halo 4 took it to a whole new level compared to Reach. Near everything saw some form of change, be that in the aforementioned visual design department, or the audio department, or even the functionality department in some cases. Some pieces of equipment became completely unrecognizable compared to their ancestors, such as the Rogue and Commando helmets. The elites became beefed up, rough-scaled, and brutish creatures with a noticeable hunch. Grunts became absolutely bloody terrifying, and jackals went from birds to dinosaurs? Now, of course, as mentioned before, this didn't just apply to visuals. Plenty of staple weapons saw audio changes, such as the plasma pistol's iconic charge tub, or the equally iconic shield recharge sound. I'm starting to sound like Hidden Xperia, bloody hell. I would also be remiss to mention the functionality changes, such as, most importantly, the burial of equal starts that had been already killed in Reach. Feel free now to have total control over not only the weapons you spawn with, but also your armor abilities, grenades, and even perks to further tailor your playstyle. Now, I could mention much more. like Master Chief's armor redesign, the new energy sword ignition sound, or the complete removal of descope, but we should just move along for now and ask why exactly all this contributed to Halo's decline. Well, I'd say look at it this way. You have a house, and it's a house you've lived in for a long time. You have a lot of memories with this house, and you know everything there is to know about its secrets and its intricacies. Now, one day you come home and find it with a brand new coat of paint, and everything just a little bit different. That painting's a bit more to the left than it was before. Some rooms are completely gone, but there are some new rooms instead. Is it still the same house you've come to know and love, really? Now, I get that that's a bit whimsical and philosophical. I hope it gets the point across. 343 willfully chose to essentially make Halo their own, with their own brand new coat of paint, and their own little intricacies. This just alienated people who may have been with the Halo franchise for over 10 years at that point. When we enjoy something long-running, we end up enjoying it out of a sense of familiarity, and when you rip away that familiarity and fundamentally make it something new, you're walking on eggshells. In my opinion, it's probably one of the largest reasons for the polarizing reception to the Reclaimer Saga. When you make so many Halo fans cry out that Halo doesn't look like Halo, it might be time to reconsider your art direction. With so many drastic changes accompanying Halo 4, did 343 follow Bungie's reach precedent of pulling from other contemporary titles in the video game medium to supplement their own product? Well, yes. In general, this time for video games saw a departure from the dark and gritty tones and visuals of titles in Reach's time, and instead of focus on brighter colors, higher detail, making use of the full capacity of technology available at the time. Titans of the industry were high-octane twitch shooters with incredibly fast time to kills. Notable titles include the bombastic and stylish Borderlands 2, Transformers Fall of Cybertron with its stark, colorful difference in comparison to the game it followed after, and the nostalgia of my personal most played Call of Duty multiplayer experience, Black Ops 2. With this in mind, I'd like to take a look at two particular games in the series they belong to that, even if they weren't a direct influence on Halo 4, are easy enough to draw connections to that it may have negatively impacted Halo 4's success. The first of those games is Mass Effect 3, for one particular reason, one mentioned earlier: art style. Mass Effect as a whole is visually pretty standard classic sci-fi. This isn't some kind of dig at Mass Effect or anything, but you gotta admit that its aesthetic isn't exactly the reason it was such a standout. Very classic sci-fi vibes with the sleek curves, glowing weapons of near magical sci-fi tech origin, and form-fitting fancy synthetic sci-fi material. Paints a much different picture to the aesthetic of Bungie's Halo, Mass Effect being more grandiose and future-oriented compared to Halo's retro, modern, 80s sci-fi vibe. But that all changed with Halo 4, which took Halo and retrofitted it with a more Mass Effect-styled aesthetic, something that someone could look at and immediately go, hey, that's probably set in the far future, due to its far more layered and alien-looking armor, stripped-down bulkiness for streamlined curves and circles, and a lot more fancy glowing things. That's pretty much why I bring up Mass Effect. 343 retrofitted Halo's aesthetic to be more in line with other sci-fi properties, and Mass Effect was probably the most comparably large of those in the video game medium at the time, and was the easiest to draw connections to. With the poor reception to Mass Effect 3, which released earlier in the year Halo 4 was released, I think it's probably at least a contributing factor to the sour taste the Reclaimer Saga began to leave in fans' mouths. I mean, it can't be too bad. They couldn't have made Halo look too similar to... Oh dear. Further from that, I'd like to mention Black Ops 2, a staple of the Call of Duty franchise that released just 6 days after Halo 4, causing Halo 4 to experience a big loss in players, like half its total player base just snapped into the ether. While Halo and Call of Duty had been butting heads for the past few years, both of these titles seemed to pull from one another in one way, one to its benefit, and the other to its detriment. Black Ops 2 pulled from Halo's general vibe and setting by choosing a grounded, modern military sci-fi setting, blending it with the period piece of Black Ops 1, and even telling a generation-spanning story that featured branching paths for its campaign. Halo, on the other hand, took inspiration from the PvP side of COD. As mentioned in the last section, 343 introduced fully customizable loadouts in Halo 4, building on the blocks of Reach, weapons, abilities, perks, the whole shebang. The entire system is almost unashamedly COD. There's even COD perks that were pretty much just copy and pasted into the game. Couple this with the faster time to kill, Reacher Sprint made innate to every player, and the removal of descoping when taking damage, one of the most common criticisms of Halo 4 is that it feels like it's just trying to be COD. For a franchise that went toe-to-toe with COD in days bygone, that is not something you want to hear. Now, to be clear, this isn't personal or anything. Despite its shortcomings, Halo 4's PvP is actually my favorite out of all the Halo games up until Infinite, so I don't have a vendetta or an agenda or anything. I just say that it marks the biggest contributor to Halo's decline. After all, why would people want to play Halo trying to be COD when they could just go play Black Ops 2? So, we all know that Halo started treading water with Halo 4's release, but how did that look specifically? Well, we can take a look here at Halo's Xbox Live player base from 2007 to 2013, and oh dear lord! Yeah, it's not a great look for Halo 4. Not only did it have the steepest drop in players as seen here, directly comparing 4 to Reach, but it also accompanies a trend for all Xbox 360 era Halo games losing steam and declining. You could even see that here, as Halo 4's player count dropped, Reach has actually spiked back up, as fans dropped it to go back to its predecessor. For a new release in a franchise, that's never a good look, and statistically speaking, it's not hard to see why Halo was losing relevance. People just clearly weren't into playing 343's vision of Halo, even despite 4's initial smash success, being the biggest launch in Halo history at the time, selling more than $220 million on its first day. In comparison, Halo 3 sold $170 million on its first day, 50 million less. So no, it wasn't that no one was interested going in, it was just that no one stuck around. Video games live and die by their player retention, and Halo 4 didn't pass the vibe check. This NeoGAF thread is an absolutely fantastic coverage of all this, one of many, and it's unfortunate that it supports my narrative. It'll be linked in the description. Comparing retention from 4 to previous Bungie titles is night and day. Halo 4 lasted 2 months in the top 3 of Xbox Live's activity chart, while Halo 3 didn't drop out of the top 3 until Reach's release. And Reach subsequently didn't fall out of the top 3 until an update from 343 a year after its release. On the first anniversaries of those 3 games, Halo 3 had 1.1 million people playing, Reach had 900,000 people playing, and Halo 4 only managed to scrape 20,000 people. Not too shabby, sure, but in comparison, point here is fan reception probably wasn't as good as everyone hoped it would be. Especially not when the main big bad of the game died in a cutscene, only he didn't die, he died in a comic instead. Why did they think that was a good idea? To close up on Halo 4, as the first steps of 343 in Bungie's shoes, it evidently wasn't a fantastic showing. Although initial interest as a follow-up to Bungie's trilogy was through the roof, the choices that 343 made and the influences they pulled from clearly did not resonate with the Halo community as expected. Halo 4's steep decline was not only reserved for itself, but for the entirety of playable Halo games at the time. This did not bode well for the future, but perhaps 343 would recognize the grave they dug themselves and remedy their shortcomings in the next entry.
Were it so easy.
Ah, good old Guardians. From everything I just talked about, it's clear that the biggest gripe with Halo 4 was simply feeling too far removed from what fans wanted from Halo. Looked too different, played too different, felt too different. So for Halo 5 Guardians, 343 listened to the Halo community, and they decided to revert to, they doubled down. Like hard doubled down. Hell, they tripled down. They triple baconated on Halo, dude. For Halo 5, 343 decided to stick with the vision they had for the franchise, updating the looks of many more things in the universe that had remained untouched by Halo 4's change in art style. After the more casual Twitch shooter vibe they had gone for with Halo 4, they switched focuses to a hyper-competitive shooter with advanced movement that was meant to capture the heart and soul of Halo's esports scene. Did it? Well... oh dear. Well, we can talk more about this later. For the moment, let's focus on what exactly 343 did with Halo 5 to try and make it a success. The studio continued to push its creative vision, broadening the universe's new art style with brand spanking new visual and audio changes, like the fancy new model and sound effects for the assault rifle. More lingering remnants of past Halo was yanked out and replaced with brand new additions to the sandbox, like the Spanker rocket launcher being yeeted into the ether and being replaced with this new banana-colored rocket launcher. And the same with the plasma pistol, with its Reach design used in 4 being updated into a brand new form. Gone was the style of armor customization started in Reach, and in was a new system that let you customize only your helmet, your visor, and your body. More restrictive than before, to say the least. To accompany the new advanced movement focus came a whole host of extreme changes that raised the level of weapon effectiveness across the board. The YouTube channel Audzolai, I hope I'm saying that right, is a great showcase of this, statistically analyzing Halo 5's weapons and their lethality. Some design shifts are noticeable even without deep analysis, however, such as the increased amount of tracking given to some weapons, pretty much all the projectile weapons to allow them to keep up and remain competitive within the game's hyper-fast pace. New weapons introduced into the sandbox were generally curated to have this tracking capability in mind, raising the lethality floor of every weapon in the game's sandbox in order to ensure competitive viability. On top of this, 343 also prioritized the competitive scene with Guardians. A significant push in the marketing for the game advertises as essentially being made for the pros. I mean, the multiplayer trailer speaks for itself.
Gets the double kill, maybe a trip, gets the triple kill, brilliant plays out a hit here in the Winter Bracket Finals.
Another choice that accompanied the shift in customization came an all-new system of progression for players. Gone were the days of customization unlocks through leveling through the game and completing unique challenges, and in was the new kid on the block. Random loot boxes, known as rec packs, with a wide swath of permanent customization options available to set your neurons off, as well as single-use gameplay influencing pulls like essentially summonable weapons and vehicles. Yeah, in order to call in like a gravity hammer, you had to pull a summon of it from a loot box. It was certainly an interesting choice on 343's part to depart even further from what was expected after years of consistency from Halo titles. There had to be some sort of influence for it, right? Well, Halo 5 released in 2015, which was around about an interesting time for games. Microtransactions were becoming more and more prevalent in AAA titles, with other large games of the same year like Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Rocket League featuring them. Halo 5 sank its teeth into the microtransaction field by implementing its loot box system, taking inspiration from other contemporary high-profile games at the time like Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and whatever FIFA was doing with its Ultimate Team mode. This was a time before loot box notoriety, with Overwatch and Star Wars Battlefront 2, allowing games to be more egregious with their implementation of such mechanics, which is why Halo 5 was out here offering single-use weapons and power-ups through its loot boxes. The Mass Effect-inspired looking standard sci-fi art style remained firmly entrenched in the game's DNA, but the shift away from a Call of Duty-inspired casual multiplayer was replaced with a brand new inspiration: Titanfall. Popular smash hit that released the year before, Titanfall basically jump-started a modern resurgence of the movement shooter, joined by other contemporary titles like COD Advanced Warfare and Bulletstorm. 343 pretty much seemed to see an opportunity in the high-octane, through-the-roof skill ceiling that advanced movement shooters offered, and implemented it as the core for Halo 5's competitive esports focus. I wonder how successful that was with the fans. Oh hey, speaking of. Unfortunately, from what I found from looking online, there's not much in the way of statistics for Halo 5's retention or total player base and what have you. After moving on from the 360, Xbox Live, public access to player base stats seems to have been restricted, something sadly commonplace nowadays. This is why we love Steam. Anyway, from what I could find, Halo 5's initial reception kinda echoed Halo 4. It grossed more than $400 million in its first week, outselling its predecessor. It's still the best-selling Xbox One game of all time, so it's clear that, like Halo 4, hope and interest was rampant among Halo fans for the new entry. These stats are straight from Microsoft, however, so I'd take them with a grain of salt since they can't actually be publicly verified. However, this initial entry gave way to polarizing reception, which I'd say can be inferred through the absolute deluge of negative videos about the game. While the game had its own merits, it still wasn't what the general Halo populace was looking for. Apart from the YouTube videos and the claims from Microsoft, the only other thing I could dredge up were these two Reddit comparisons between Halo 5's beta and the Reach and Halo 3 betas, which paints the narrative that retention for Halo 5 was nowhere near as high as those two games. Regardless, much of this is rather unverifiable, but seeing the fact that 343 doubled down on making Halo different, instead of listening to what the fans wanted after Halo 4, is reason enough for me to believe that Halo 5 Guardians has the general consensus of being, not that well liked. So at the end of the day, why did 343's Reclaimer Saga fail to reclaim the engagement of Halo fans? To put it simply, 343 made choices to change Halo into their vision that only led to alienating longtime fans of the series. They pulled from contemporary video game influences to essentially retrofit Halo into molds that it had never intended to be. And yet, despite the outcry from the fans, nothing much of anything was actually done to appease the outrage at just how different Halo had become. But a break in the storm clouds now. 343 canned the Reclaimer trilogy, leaving it as just the saga we know today, and moved on to work on a brand new Halo title, one that sported a brand new, old coat of paint and promised to be a return to form for this weary franchise. So, how did they do? Did Halo Infinite manage to avoid the pitfalls that the Reclaimer Saga dug? Well, you're gonna have to find out next time, won't you? Cheers. Have a good one.